Pretty welcome to the video. It's Tuesday, September 2nd. We're breaking down the split slate day that we have over on DraftKings. We have a 3-game early slate and a 5-game main slate tonight. And yes, we'll be breaking down both in today's video. And while these aren't the greatest slates, I'm never a big fan of these super small slates. We still have some decent pitching options. We got Coors Field. We have a couple decent stacks to talk about, so I've definitely seen way worse out there before. And if you do find this video helpful in any way possible, please leave a like, subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet already. If you want to take that one step further, become an official member over on Patreon. Link is down below in the description for that. But we have 3 sports going on now: football, NASCAR, and baseball. So there's a lot to be excited about. And last but not least, this video is sponsored by Prize Picks. I'm sure most of you know what it is by now, but if you don't, it's daily fantasy sports simplified. Just you versus the projections. There's no sharks, 150 max contests, or salary cap restrictions, or anything like that. Just you versus the props that they offer each and every single day. And as of right now, if you're new signee over on Prize Picks, you can use code CPEN to get a free money bonus. That's an instant deposit match up to $100 when you use code CPEN and tell them I sent you. But I think that's it for the plugs for the most part, so without further ado, let's dive into today's video. And as always, we'll start with the pitchers, then move on to the bats. And we'll start with the early slate guys here. And up top, we have Aaron Nola at $9,500, who feels a bit underpriced for a 3-game slate, so I will take that all day. It's a very good matchup here versus Washington. They've lost a lot of guys recently just because of trades, guys getting suspended, like Starlin Castro. So outside of Josh Bell and Juan Soto, you're not really scared of anybody in this lineup. So if I had to guess the team total, probably going to be in the low 3s here. He's got a 7K prop over in Vegas, and he's had his fair share of really strong games for fantasy purposes this season, boasting a K rate close to 30%. Sierra and XFIP are run lower than ZRA at 4.3, so he has been getting a little bit unlucky this season. Gives up a little bit of power, 170 ISO given up at a hard contact rate below 30%. Not really scared of anybody in this Washington lineup. I think at $9,500 he's kind of a steal, so I would definitely be playing him on the early slate. If you guys are playing cash games, I'd have a really hard time not playing Aaron Nola. And then dropping down to Logan Webb here, $9,000. I know it kind of feels weird spending $9,000 for Logan Webb, but if you're looking at his recent game log and just his numbers on the season, he has been really good. I know he doesn't have quite the name value, but the guy has been pitching lights out. Only a 3.25 implied team total against him. Pretty heavy favorite, 6K prop over in Vegas. Milwaukee will strike out quite a bit versus right-handed pitching. And if we're looking at his numbers on the season, very good. 105 innings pitched, which isn't big of a sample size as guys like Aaron Nola and Frankie Montas, but it's not terribly low. But a 2.65 ERA, 2.9 xFIP, 3.25 Sierra, over a 26% K rate. Doesn't really walk too many guys, only allowing a .096 ISO with a 61% ground ball rate, 18% fly ball rate, and only a 27% hard contact rate with a less than a homer allowed per 9. So Logan Webb, pitcher friendly park in San Francisco, definitely think he's a good tournament option because I feel like most people are going to go Aaron Nola and Frankie Montas today because everyone likes to pick on Detroit. Montas is coming off a pretty good game versus the New York Yankees. But I definitely like Logan Webb a lot. You can make a case for him in cash games. I wouldn't have a problem with that, but definitely a very strong play in the early slate. Then Frankie Montas here, $8,400. He gets a good matchup versus Detroit, a team that will strike out quite a bit versus righties. I know they've definitely been better this season than probably expected. It's always been a team in the past that we always pick on, which I still pick on them. They still strike out quite a bit, but they definitely have more power in their bats this season. Akil Baddoo leading off, he's definitely a threat there. He went deep last night, so be a little bit careful here with Montas, but it's definitely a pretty good spot overall because they're striking out around 26% of the time versus right-handed pitching, which is one of the tops in the entire league. But his numbers on the season have been pretty strong, not quite as good as Logan Webb, although it's a bigger sample size, but a 3.6 ERA, 3.5 xFIP, 3.7 Sierra, 26.8% K rate, walking too many guys, not giving up too much power, has a lean to the ground balls, only a homer allowed per 9, and 30% hard contact rate. It's mainly just the matchup versus Detroit here with their strikeout upside, like 26% of the time versus righties, 301 WOBA, 89 WRC plus. They're a below average team versus right-handed pitching, and Montas at $8,400 definitely feels like a pretty strong price point. And then moving on to the early slate guys here, we'll start with Shane McClanahan, $10,100. He gets a kind of a rough matchup here versus Boston at home. They are without Xander Bogaerts, which is a plus for him, and there's only a 3.3 implied team total against him, which is pretty good for a team like Boston. It's also a very pitcher-friendly park here in Tampa in the Trop. And last time he faced Boston at home, I believe he scored around 25, 26 fantasy points. So while this isn't exactly the best matchup on paper, I think McClanahan's upside definitely warrants him to be in the player pool tonight for pitcher. If we're looking at his numbers in the season, pretty good ERA, XFIP even lower at 3.24, Sierra 3.6, close to a 28% K rate. Hasn't given up too much power so far, has leaned to the ground balls, limits the hard contact. I don't love the matchup here if you're looking at Boston splits versus left-handed pitching. They're only striking out 21.5% of the time, 170 ISO, 105 WRC plus, and a 329 WOBA. I love the park he's pitching in. It's definitely a downgrade for Boston going from Fenway to the Trop. So I think McClanahan, if you can stomach the price point of over $10,000, he is definitely a very strong option. And the pitching on the late slate tonight is not as good as the early slate, so I just have to eat it and play Shane McClanahan at this price point. The problem is I really want to get exposure to Coors Field, and they're quite expensive today with the Atlanta Braves, so I'm not sure how easy it's going to be to be able to fit in McClanahan in the Braves, but we'll have to play around with it later on. Then Tristan McKenzie, 9,300 bucks. He can be a bit of a boomer bust pitcher because he gives up a lot of power, but he also has a good strikeout rate, but he walks a lot of guys as well. Now, the matchup versus KC, they're not a team that'll strike out too much, but they really don't have that much power versus right-handed pitching. And Tristan McKenzie has definitely shown a lot of upside in certain games this season. I mean, there was that one game where he was absolutely spectacular. 9,300 bucks feels a bit expensive for me, but a team total below 4 against him. He's a slight underdog, 6.5 K prop over in Vegas if we're looking at his numbers in the season. The main appeal here is that 28.5% K rate because the XFIP and Sierra are not super promising. The walk rate's over 12%, which is pretty ugly. He gives up a little bit of power to a 186 ISO and a 52% fly ball. Like, he is not a safe pitcher by any means. I think he's a good tournament option here just because of the strikeout upside, although I'm not super excited about Tristan McKenzie in the spot, but relative to the other options that we have on this slate, there's really nothing else to talk about. So I think Tristan McKenzie is in play just because of the lack of options today. And then dropping on down to Cookie Carrasco here, $8,000 in a very, very good matchup versus Miami at home in New York, which has been a very pitcher-friendly park. It's not a big sample size this year, so I hate to put anything too much into it. Only 23 innings pitched so far. His ERA is terrible at 7, but his XFIP and Sierra are about half that, so he's been getting extremely unlucky. Plus, we can see it a lot when we have smaller sample size of things. He's only averaging 61 pitches per game, but you got to keep in mind he's been building up. His last start, I want to say he went 7 innings, close to 80 pitches. Assuming we see something similar, he should be able to get us those 5+ innings. Hopefully, pick up the win tonight, but I don't really have too many concerns here because of the price point. And the other options we have today are just really not that great unless you want to play Tukey Toussaint in Coors Field today. 23% K rate, which is not amazing, but only a 4% walk rate, so he's been limiting the walk, which he's always had pretty good control. He's given up a lot of power so far, but fortunately enough for us, Miami doesn't really have too much power to have to worry about that. Has had a lean to the ground ball so far. A kind of alarming 35% hard contact rate and over 2 homers per 9. But again, we're dealing with smaller sample sizes here, and this is pretty much the best matchup you can ask for, so I don't really have too many concerns here with Carrasco. But with that being said, I think that'll be pretty much it for the pitching, so we'll move right over to today's bats. And we'll start with the one and only early slate team I want to talk about here because the rest of the bats just really aren't that exciting. But we have the Oakland A's on the road versus Matt Manning and the Detroit bullpen, which is not exactly that great. We have a team total close to 5.5. And Manning this season is only boasting like a 12% K rate, close to a 40% hard contact rate. ERA and XFIP both above 5. And the Oakland A's, while they are kind of expensive in some spots, this is a pretty good hitting team. And I definitely have a lot of interest here. They're definitely by far the best team to roster on the early slate today. But we have Josh Harrison leading off, $4,100. He was very productive yesterday. Also always has stolen base upside. Marte is super, super expensive, but he's certainly in play. Matt Olson crushes righties. I mean, that's one of the top home run spots in the entire slate. Matt Chapman's expensive. Lowry, Canna, Tony Kemp, Sean Murphy, Elvis Andrews. Like, this is a pretty expensive stack, but if you roster Aaron Nola and you use like a cheaper SP2 today, which, you know, like a guy like Frankie Montas or even Logan Webb, that's not insanely expensive at pitching today compared to some slates. Like yesterday, I played Garrett Cole, Max Scherzer, could still get some decent bats in my lineup, and like, it really hasn't been too hard spending it for pitching and still getting the bats I want this year. Then moving on to the main slate here, we have the Atlanta Braves on the road in Coors Field versus Chichi Gonzalez, a guy we always tend to pick on. He's got an ERA above 6. The XFIP is not too far behind, over a 220 ISO given up this season. Close to a 40% hard contact rate. He's just not very good, not a big strikeout guy, so feel free to load up on the Braves here. Now, they are a bit expensive in the meat of that order, but guys like Jock Peterson, Jorge Soler are not that expensive, so I would assume they're going to be very, very chalky today in cash games. Freddie Freeman, the overall top play in the entire slate. If you have the money for him, I'd really try to find a way to fit him in because projection-wise, he is like a couple points higher than anybody else today. So I'm really going to try to prioritize getting Freddie Freeman in. Austin Riley, Disney Swanson are super expensive. Obviously, everyone grades out pretty well here. Travis Arnett at catcher, only $4,300. Adam Duvall, $46. Then Adrianza, if you want a free play in Coors Field today, he's only $2,000. You can play him at third base or the outfield. I mean, he's not in a very exciting bat. His numbers in the season are not super impressive at 242 batting average, 318 WOBA, and a 157 ISO, but at $2,000, I mean, make some things work up top with some either expensive pitching or just some expensive bats today. And then moving on to the opposite side of this game, we have the Colorado Rockies at home in the same very hitter-friendly park in Coors Field versus Tukey Toussaint, a guy that has struggled with power so far this year. I prefer the lefties. He struggled more so versus them. They've been a little bit tougher on the righties, but I think everybody is in play. Tapia leading off at $3,900. I think that's a very safe, solid cash game play today. Brendan Rodgers is a righty, which again, I prefer the lefties, but you can play everybody here. Charlie Blackmon, very expensive now, $5,200, but he's a left-hand righty matchup. Trevor Story is obviously the best overall play here. CJ Cron, Ryan McMahon, left-hand righty matchup there. Diaz, and then Sam Hilliard, $2,400. If you need some expensive pitching today, you want to fit in guys like Freddie Freeman, you want to play Austin Riley, Dansby Swanson. A guy like Sam Hilliard at $2,400 can definitely free up some salary if you don't want to play Adrianza, who is dirt cheap for the Atlanta Braves. I mean, Hilliard definitely has a lot more power in his bat. He's boasting a 250 ISO on the season with only a 200 batting average, but I definitely like the power upside and a very cheap left handed matchup versus Touki Toussaint. Moving on to our ugly stack of the day, we have the Chicago Cubs at home in Wrigley Field versus Mitch Keller. Now, I'll tell you right now, you have to be a really bad pitcher for me to want to roster the Cubs against you because their lineup is absolutely terrible versus right-handed pitching. But, I mean, Keller in the season, ERA close to 7, xFIP above 5, below a 20% K rate, close to a 200 ISO given up, and a 40% hard contact rate allowed. Like, I know the wind's blowing in a little bit, but, I mean, Mitch Keller is a guy that we can always attack each and every single day. And some of these bats are okay, but, I mean, it's just overall not a very good lineup. But Rafael Ortega, $4,100 leading off here, batting on 300 on the season, 21 ISO. Don't hate that. Frank Schwindel, he went deep yesterday. He's actually been pretty good this season. It's only 125 plate appearances, but I like the price point. Batting above 300 with a 274 ISO. Ian Happ, switch hitter. He's got some pop versus righties. Patrick Wisdom has power, but he does strike out a lot. Matt Duffy, kind of prefer him versus lefties, but it's fine at $2,800. Jason Hayward, Chirinos, Alcantara. I mean, I don't have many good things to say about this lineup, but it's just a good matchup versus Mitch Keller. There's no team total yet. If I had to guess, probably around 4.5 to 5 would be my assumption, maybe in the lower end of that, just because it's the Cubs and the wind's blowing in a little bit, so it's going to be a little bit of a downgrade for the bats, but I love this matchup versus Keller. And then moving on over to the homer pick of the day, we have the Cleveland Indians on the road in KC versus Mike Minor, who is not the greatest pitcher out there. He's not terrible, but I wouldn't say he's amazing. Team total just seems way too low in my opinion at 3.6. Honestly, should be around 4, 4.5 would be my guess of what it should be. So maybe I'm missing something here, but this just seems way too low, and this is a very, very inexpensive stack here. Miles Straw leading off $3,000. Has stolen base upside. He's been playing really well. Ahmed Rosario has been on fire. $4,300. He had that like 40, 50-point game a couple days ago. Jose Ramirez crushes lefties. Framil Reyes has close to a 300 ISO to left-handed pitching this season. Then the rest of these guys are absolutely free. Harold Ramirez, Oscar Mercado, Owen Miller, Yu Chang, Austin Hedges. So if you want some expensive pitching today and you want to fit in the Braves, maybe you could do a very cheap Indian stack. You might have to skip out on guys like Jeremy and Framil Reyes, but if you go Straw, Ramirez, Mercado, it is very, very inexpensive, and I definitely think they're in a decent spot. I mean, Mike Minor is not terrible, but looking at his numbers on the year, I mean, I'm not super scared about this. ERA above 5, next flip above 4.25, close to a 200 ISO given up, 31% hard contact rate, 43% fly ball rate, and if we look at his splits versus righties, he's giving up over a 200 ISO, over a 3% hard contact rate, 43% fly ball rate, and an xFIP close to 4.5 with an ERA closer to 6 with close to 2 homers allowed per 9. Like, I know it's not a pretty team, but these price points are definitely interesting to me. But with that being said, I think that'll be pretty much it for the video. So I hope it was helpful, and if it was, make sure to leave a like, subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet already. If you want to take that one step further, become an official member over on Patreon. Link is down below in the description for that. But we have 3 sports going on now: NFL, NASCAR, and baseball. And it's the beginning of the month, so it's the best time to sign up. And don't forget, this video was sponsored by PrizePicks. It's just you versus the projections. And as of right now, if you're new signing over there, you can use code CPEN to get a free money bonus up to $100 when you tell them I sent you. I think that'll be pretty much it. I will stop rambling, and I'll see you guys on Friday for the next video.